Hey, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women. This is for thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Our Lady, seat of wisdom. Saint Jerome. And Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Who asked me why I don't ever wear this thing? Does anybody remember? It's like I always got to loosen it. Always loosen it. I've had a crazy day. Crazy day. Actually, I've had a pretty fun 4 days. So was anybody with me a couple days ago? I don't see anybody. No, well, that was a while ago. Where are they all at? Oh, because they're too tired probably. Let's see. Yesterday, I was wading I got lost in the middle of the woods, south of Tahoe, and I was wading across a very poetically named body of water called Lake in the Woods. I was laughing while I had to wade across it because I knew I was supposed to be on the other side of it, but I didn't want to walk around it. And the day before that, I was swimming in a lake called Lake Aloha, which I don't know why something would be called Lake Aloha in the Sierra Madres. But it was a nice lake. And then today, I was drinking scotch with the bishop. And it's going to be interesting. I told him what I was doing and why I had to leave. I left the other two priests there. They had to do the dishes. As I skirted away in Father Curtis's car, and I'm late. It's 8:06. Mea culpa. I'm bad. Did everybody here get my email?
No. I'm still off. I don't know.
How are you not? How are you off?
I don't know. I send you the message and then you send me the stuff and I get it.
Ben, did you get it? You didn't read it? Okay, the short of the email is I'm finishing today. I'm going till I'm done. And as normal, the bishop's meal kind of what happened to my thing? This is like really messed up. Who did this? My IT guy? Wow, I have a great IT guy. He's like, okay. So this is my last lecture on Job. I think this was 12. How many have we done?
13 was last week.
Oh, okay, so this is 14. When the bishop heard that I had done 13 hour-long lectures on Job, he goes, "Are you serious?" And he's like, "Wow, I never knew there was that much to say about the book of Job." Now, everybody in this class knows immediately there's more to be said, right? I had this great plan. I was going to prep and I was going to show you right now a video of my first lecture. Of me talking about how I wasn't going to answer any questions. And we were going to go through the book of Job. And Job is a problem book. And it's a very complicated book. And you're all going to be disappointed because you're going to be like, what's it mean? And you're going to have all these question marks everywhere. And I told you, first lecture, I'm not going to give you any answers because I don't have the answers. But as I'm starting to reflect and think about it, in the Bible you have certain types. Wow, those kids are awesome. No, leave them, let them go. That's fine. They have to have fun. Oh yeah, tell them to go run over there. They always choose the door. What was I saying before the kids screamed in my ear? That I don't have all the answers. I didn't say I had all the answers. I said I don't have all the answers. Book of Problems. In the Bible, we have a number of types of literature. We could actually call it a number of types of, certain sense, a number of types of theology, biblical theology. You have, you could call it dogmatic and sacred history, kind of like the writing of God's interaction with human beings and their relationships. Okay, that's really and his building of the kingdom and his nation. That's basically what the Pentateuch is. The Pentateuch, if you want to think about it, the Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Bible, and it's like creation coming out, and then faith being instilled, that's Abraham, and then a family being born, that's Jacob, and then the family in exile. It ends in Egypt with Joseph. And then you have Exodus, which is the delivery from hardship. Then you have Leviticus, which is how man worships God. And then you have Numbers, which is man in the desert, my favorite book, the book of Numbers. Maybe someday. Maybe someday. We'll get to the book of Numbers. A book that most people stop reading because it starts with a bunch of senses, like so many people from the tribe, and so they stop in chapter 2, and it's an awesome book. Anyway, and then you get to Deuteronomy, which is the return into the promised land. Deuteronomy is the second telling. So you have like the sacred history of God establishing a people and their deliverance from bondage and their entry into the promised land. You have them building of the secular kingdom. That's like in the promise in the book of Judges. Ruth gives you like the genealogy of David. You have the 2 books of Judges, or 2 books of Samuel, 2 books of Kings. It's establishment of the kingdom, and then it's futile separation. You have some what's called the book of Kings end with the nation in exile again. It's like, and you know what? We're in it again in a certain sense, but they go into exile to Babylon. We have to remember, Abraham was drawn from Babylon. One of the reasons this is pertinent because Babylon is going to give us some of our, at least culturally, Babylon influences the Bible in lots of ways than we would ever think. But they go into exile to Babylon. And then you have some what we call exilic literature. You have Esther, you have Tobit. These are faithful people in foreign lands. In the Bible, you also have what's called wisdom literature. And that's completely different. It does not recount to you sacred history. It doesn't give you some kind of historical narrative. It's highly poetical, and it's meant to school you in really wisdom. And as we've been reading Job, everyone's thinking, like, what the heck is wisdom? Man does not know it. I mean, that's like the main thing about Job. Which is why I've been reflecting. You have in the Catholic Bible, we have a number of books of wisdom. We have Job, we have we have Psalms, we have Proverbs, we have the Song of Solomon, we have the Wisdom of Solomon, we have Sirach, Ecclesiastes. These are they all carry general themes, and they deal with what we call sapiential or wisdom literature. Basically, it seems to be like the rabbinical schools, the people trying to teach a young man or a young person into how to order his life in order to effectively live rightly amidst creation and with God. The first book of the wisdom literatures, actually in our Bible, is Job. It's the first one that you hit. Now, how is that a springboard into studying wisdom? I mean, because the book of Job basically tells you you have none. And I think actually, if you don't actually walk away from the book of Job with that, the rest of the book of wisdom, the rest of the books of wisdom are closed to you. The Bible has nothing to teach you. You didn't learn your lesson. Go back to Job. That's what I would say. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I see the book of Job, though we treat it as isolated as a book with its own literary life, and it's awesome, but that doesn't mean it was ever considered to be a self-sustained, independent unit. Like, your study of God's wisdom doesn't stop with Job. So why are you frustrated that you don't understand it? Because the whole point is that maybe you're not supposed to. Because you have to read the rest of the book of wisdom. And so I think Job is really a problem book in order to make you start scratching your head. And I think Thomas is right. It does deal with providence and how God does even establish order through the most difficult thing to see, which is like what from the human perspective is unjust suffering, the suffering of a righteous man. But anyway, like Ecclesiastes, likewise, it's a problem book. So, but Job, I think it's okay to see it as a problem book. It's the first book of wisdom. And so you're supposed to use it as a springboard to continue going into Scripture. So it's okay if it's confusing to you. When the bishop told me, like, 13, that's amazing. I never thought somebody could talk that long in the book of Job. Father Lyons goes, I know. I thought he was going to be done after 1 because I can only give a talk for 20 minutes. And he talked for them for an hour and a half on the first night, so I thought he's done. And then it's like, still going. So anyway, we're still going, but we're going to end tonight. And we're going to end in a very good way. Because even if you didn't walk away with like great, profound answers to the mysteries of life, which, in my defense, I told you I would not give you in the first class, you did learn a lot. First of all, you learned that biblical poetry is really complicated and employs mechanics that you probably never thought about before, which goes much deeper than just parallelisms. It also goes with its structuring and how it plays with images. Because actually, one of the true salient parts of wisdom is actually knowing the full potential for God's creation, exactly how much it can do. That's the basis of science, too, to tell you the truth. So you've learned a lot by studying Job. So the next series of classes is going to be on the office of the dead. And I did that for a reason. I'm going to do it in October to prep you for actually the Feast of All Souls Day, which is when the priest actually will recite the Office of the Dead. It's the only day that's mandatory now for us to recite the Office of the Dead. Office of the Dead was a very popular prayer of the church. I'm going to teach that in October. And we're going to be well equipped, those of you who have studied Job, to actually study that. Because we're going to deal with Psalms, which is biblical poetry, and then we're going to deal with actually the book of Job again, because the Office of the Dead uses it 9 times. Actually, more than that. So that's what the next session is going to be on. So this one, though, is going to conclude Job. Where, again, we're not going to get any big, mysterious, profound answers. We'll try to find some brilliance, though, in it a little bit. So, before I get into Yahweh's big theophonic monologue, where he gives Job his comeuppance, I want to give a brief overview of the Leviathan. This is something we've heard referenced. It's referenced more in the book of Job than any other book of the Bible. And this shouldn't surprise us because of the poetry, the poetic level of the book of Job. Now, I found this quote from St. Jerome, and I thought it was amazing. This is like going to go in my book. St. Jerome is actually writing to one of his enemies called Vigilantius. And he's actually comparing him as a worse monster than all these other monsters. And so he's going through this is the first line of his open letter against Vigilantius. The world has given birth to many monsters. In Isaiah, we read of centaurs and sirens, screech owls and pelicans. Job, in mystic language, describes Leviathan and the behemoth. And then he continues and he goes, but the world has never generated something so wicked as Vigilantius. And then he goes about, just like Jerome. He's like, awesome. But anyway, what I really liked is this. This is St. Jerome. In mystic language describes Leviathan and behemoth. So this is, Jerome sees the biblical poet using very mystic kind of language. And I have a note on that. And it's literally, it's mysticus. Mysticus humorin describi. This is what he says. And mystical words described, okay? So he doesn't see the description of Leviathan as something very natural history. Job, the biblical poet, trying to portray an actual real creature. The only reason why I tell you that, because almost all of you in your Bibles at home are going to find a footnote saying, oh yeah, the behemoth is a hippopotamus and Leviathan is a crocodile. And I would say, read what it describes. There's no way you're going to walk away with a crocodile when you read the Leviathan. Or the hippopotamus. It's like legs of bronze, and the Leviathan breathes fire, and the ocean boils. That's no. It's a very cosmic kind of creature. Jerome, pondering this, saw it in mystic language. Okay. Now, our last 2 classes ago, I went into Providentissimus Deus, which these are citations that I'm not going to bog you down in that. Where basically Pius XII was saying how we have to look at the cultures around in order to see how biblical language develops, because it didn't develop in a vacuum. And I think some of us, I think, forget that. We forget where our own language comes from. Are you a pagan? Are you a pagan? Don't tell me no. You're not a pagan. Say no.
No.
No. Okay. What day is today? No. What day of the week?
Thursday.
It's Thursday. What? What is it? Thursday. You believe in Thor or what? I thought we were all over that. Wasn't it like people worship rocks and sticks and stuff? Like we're still talking about Thor? Huh? What's Wednesday? Do you know? There you go. Odin. Old Father Odin or Woden. There you go. Now that's just a cultural sign for a day in the week. It just means a day in the week for us. It doesn't mean some kind of like pantheon of gods or anything like that. It doesn't have any of that baggage. Okay? Like your language employs so much stuff that comes from just very, very different cultures that actually use those words in ways that you do not use them now, or they carried meanings that you don't take now. The one I always like to use is actually Pontifex Maximus, which is like the Pope. Did you know Julius Caesar was Pontifex Maximus? It was an elected position in pagan Rome. Did you know that? It's a powerful one because they set the calendar. So like if they wanted to rule longer, they could just mess with the calendars. They added an extra month. It's like, yeah, consuls get to keep going. Very powerful because it was a life position. So anyway, we use things. Language is just a bunch of signs, and our signs don't just generate out of the ether. They come from actually interacting with other people and cultures. Ancient Israelites, where the Bible was generated, it was not a book that fell from heaven. Absolutely not. It went through a human hand. Inspiration, does anybody know what the etymology of inspiration is? Inspiro, right? Like a breathing in. Okay, breathing into what? You always see those pictures of like the evangelists. You know, Caravaggio's Matthew, he's like bent over writing. There's an angel like whispering into his ear. Okay, the angel's not holding in Matthew's hand and writing. No, Matthew's like writing, but he's being inspired to write. But it's really a human instrument, a living human instrument. And he is writing to other human living people. And he's writing in he has to write in words that people will understand. Because revelation is meant to reveal. So if it's a closed language, it's not going to reveal anything. Right? If I was up here talking in Chinese, would you learn anything? I have to use words that you understand, so I use English. Let's not go liturgical on me, Susan, okay? Don't worry. I'm not going to start speaking English in Mass. That's something different. We'll get to that later. So anyway, the ancient Israelites developed signs, symbols, and they lived amongst a bunch of different cultures. And to understand how they use their words, sometimes it's good to know how it was used in the various cultures around them. And now, Egypt and Babylon are two very powerful cultures. Okay? Why are they really powerful? Not only because like Egypt is like one of the first countries to actually establish and build monumental architecture. Thank you very much. And it was like right behind ancient Babylon, Sumer. It was right behind them as far as having the first written language, literary language. So basically history starts with like Egyptians and ancient Babylonians. That's an important fact too. They were huge magnets of socio-economic activity in the region. And not only that, ancient Israelites spent a lot of time in both places. And that's in the Bible, right? Like 500 years in Egypt and like 70 in Babylon. Okay. So, it is fascinating. This creature, Leviathan, what we can get to is, in the Bible, it actually uses a bunch of different names. There's Leviathan, there's Tananine, there's Raban, there's the dragon. And I'll show you various citations. I'm going to give you this document. One of the things that we can all see is that it's something that has to do with the ocean. It deals with the sea, and it's a snake, or it's a type of serpent. Now, this is actually getting kind of popular today by a psychologist, Jordan Peterson. He's always talking about chaos now. Is anybody familiar with Jordan Peterson? Have you ever heard him talk about chaos? Well, anyway, he's always talking about like the sea thing. And I haven't heard him reference Leviathan yet, but he should, because it's like all over the place. He has to know about it. So anyway, in the different cultures, it manifests differently. In the Egyptians, the chaos snake is, and I got a couple images. This is Atum, the sun god, and he has this stick right here, okay? And he's going to stab this like snake right here. Okay, this is at the setting of the sun. So for the Egyptians, the big long serpent is in the dark. And it's at the setting of the sun that the snake needs to be conquered in order to make it through and have a dawn. Okay, so chaos equals darkness, and the snake is in the dark, waiting to eat the sun. And so they had their symbol for that which destroys life is this big snake, which doesn't carry a solid shape, which resides in the darkness, which seeks to destroy that from which life comes, the sun. Okay? Now, this dates from like 13th to 12th century BC, this picture of Atum battling this serpent. I took this actually from that book I just ordered from Amazon. So everybody actually, when they would die, the Egyptians would write these. This is from the Book of the Dead. Everybody had to deal with this serpent when it died in order to rise from the dead. Okay? And so this is Ani the scribe. This is in his Book of the Dead. And he has to battle the serpent as he crosses through this door. Okay? As he embarks on his journey through the night. So this is kind of like the Egyptian motif of the serpent, is that which you have to conquer in order to get to the life beyond. It's a symbol for death, destruction, chaos, night. This is later, this is 19th dynasty, so it's still 13th, 12th century, but this is Seth destroying the big serpent, okay? And so Seth is a god, and he has to spear the serpent. Here's a more interesting picture of Seth destroying the serpent. So this is Ra on his ship. So the Egyptians had this like really famous, complicated system where like the sun is on a day ship, and then it has to take on a night ship. Okay, so it travels through the sky the day, and then it travels through another boat at night through the darkness. And Ra is on a ship going through the darkness, and his brother Seth is on the prow, and his brother Seth has to like kill the snake, which is always trying to destroy. Okay? So this isn't yin and yang. You have darkness constantly trying to take over light, but light constantly being victorious. Okay? Do you get the yin and yang reference? This isn't Eastern mysticism where you have two things that are equally balanced and harmonious. This is forces of darkness and the forces of light. And the forces of darkness are constantly trying to destroy light, but the light is constantly victorious. Okay? Order and chaos. They both always exist, but chaos is constantly having to be held in check. Chaos is the serpent. And this is a bigger picture of the same thing. So again, so we see gods battling snakes. Now, in Akkadian, which is, I have a map. I'll show you really quickly on a map. So these are our different regions that we're dealing with. We're dealing with Egypt. We're going to deal with Akkadian, which is down here. And we're going to deal with Ugaritic, which is going to be up here. Okay? Israel's ends up right here, but they hang out. Remember, Abraham comes from over here, comes down here, and then he goes down here and hangs up here. So this whole area is dealing with the same kind of motif of this like sea serpent. So Akkadian. So Akkadian had she was female. It had a female goddess called Tiamat. This was the main adversarial goddess who actually sought to destroy the father of men. It's a very complicated mythology, but this is a short citation from it. And I just wanted you to see it so you could. Tiamat is the sea goddess, and listen to how it describes things. Tiamat, a woman that flies at thee with weapons. O my Father, Creator, be glad and rejoice. The neck of Tiamat thou shalt soon tread upon. O my Father, Creator, be glad and rejoice. The neck of Tiamat thou shalt soon tread upon. My son, thou knowest all wisdom. Calm Tiamat with thy holy spell. On the storm chariot proceed with all speed. For her presence they shall not drive thee. Turn them back. Tiamat, she who bore us to test us. So this is, Marduk is going to go battle the sea serpent, Tiamat. And he's going to become the head god. Now, but she's the sea, and he has to tread upon her. Now he's going to kill her, but I wanted to tell me if some of this stuff doesn't sound kind of familiar. He raised the mace with his right hand and grasped it. Bow and quiver he hung at his side. In front of him he set the lightning. With a blazing flame he filled his body. He then made a net to enfold Tiamat therein. The four winds he stationed that nothing of her might escape. The south wind, the north wind, the east wind, the west wind. Close to his side he set the net, the gift of his father Anu. He brought forth the evil wind, the whirlwind, the hurricane, the fourfold wind, the sevenfold wind, the cyclone, the matchless wind. Okay, Marduk is the storm god. Has anybody seen a storm at sea? It's pretty violent. And the sea's going all over the place, right? He then sent forth the winds he had brought forth, the seven of them. 7 is an important number for the ancient Babylonians too. To stir up the inside of Tiamat, they rose up behind him. Then the Lord raised the flood storm, his mighty weapon. He mounted the storm chariot. He harnessed. He yoked a team of 4, the killer, the relentless, the trampler, the swift. Those are the 4 horses. It's like their own 4 horses of the apocalypse. The Lord went forth and followed his course. Towards the raging Tiamat he set his face. So Marduk, this is the Enuma Elish. Marduk has to destroy the sea serpent in order for actually life to show up, because he ends up dividing the sea into 2, and he throws one end and makes the sky out of it, and he makes the sea in the other. It's almost like Genesis day 2, if you think about it, the separation of the waters. Now, one of the neat things, and I was talking to somebody about this, was when you read these, though you find similarities in images, you realize how different our Bible is. Actually, because Genesis day 2 doesn't have anything of this kind of cosmic battle, right? But this idea of Yahweh with lightning bolts and storm wind, and have we heard something similar like that? We do find that stuff God described that way. You'll find it in the Psalms, you find it in the book of Job. What the Bible seeks to do, at least in Genesis, is it seeks to it uses words and mythologies, and then it strips away, this is my view of it, it strips away the gross errors. And it leaves you it leaves you the true meaning inside of it, which is God made everything in a well-ordered thing. And he didn't have to really fight anything to do it. But it uses the same images. It's not trying to tell you there's a sea up there. But it has to use languages that people know. So Tiamat, sea. The main thing is that Tiamat is the sea goddess. And she gets crushed and her body gets all chopped up, and it's like it gets really kind of drastic. Now, Canaan, that's Ugaritic, that might as well be, it's a Phoenician and Canaan, it's the same kind of culture. This is Baal versus Yam. Yam is the Hebrew word for sea. Okay, so the sea, it's the sea god again. What enemy is risen against Baal? Now, Baal for you, don't get all freaked out. Like, Baal means master. It's also, it's a word for wife. The Bible uses Baal for wife. Does anybody know that? No? Because you know it as like a demonic god, probably. Because it means it's the pagan Canaanite god. But all it means is master. It's like Allah. And so it also means Uxor, or the Vir, the master over the woman. It uses it. The Hebrew Bible uses the word Baal for both things, so it doesn't always mean like capital B. But this is the capital B. What enemy is risen against Baal? Who fought against the rider of clouds? What foe against the rider of clouds? Baal's a storm god. He's the Canaanite version of Marduk, the Babylonian god. Crushed I not El's beloved Yam? Destroyed I not El's flood, Rabin? Did I not pray, muzzle the dragon? I did crush the crooked serpent, Shilot, the seven-headed. Did I crush El's beloved? Who fought thee and seized gold? Who drove Baal from the heights of Zophon? Chased him from his throne of kingship, from the dais, the seat of his dominion. Okay, so this is a section from the Ugaritic Baal cycle. It's very fragmentary, but we see terms here that we've actually seen before, right? Baal lives on Zaphon. That word's been in the book of Job in a couple places. Rabin does sound like Rabban, but I don't think it's related. And we have seen the Yam. And again, this is from the Baal citation. Now, this is what almost everybody uses to find what Leviathan is. If thou smite Lotan, the serpent slant, destroy the serpent torturous, Shilot of the seven heads. So the Canaanites use this word Shilot and Lotan as equivocals, which was up here too. Shilot, the seven-headed. So the seven-headed sea serpent is a Canaanite thing. Now, so one thing that we can say right now is that all these different cultures all had a similar image to describe the forces against God establishing creation or order. And the symbol they chose to use was a big sea serpent. Now we can see why in a certain sense. One, you can't live in the sea, right? Like, I always found that fascinating that you can die of dehydration in the middle of the ocean. Human beings can. So it's a literal desert of water. So it's a place of death. Okay, so what's the sea? Death. What's the shape of it? Have you ever thought about that? Like, it's constantly moving. Does it move? Like water moves, right? It's constantly like trying to break its bounds. It's constantly trying to go a little bit farther up the shore, cause a landslide by Big Sur. You know, pick your thing, right? It's amorphous. I don't know if I'm spelling this right. That's not right at all. There you go. It's shapeless. It's death, it's shapeless, and it's that which humans can't ever habitate on. And so we can see, and it's that which it seems that heaven strikes, because heaven brings down water. So you have water, death water, and you have living water, because rain gives you that's where your crops grow, right? That's what causes the Nile, the flood, and the harvest season. You can actually irrigate your land. So you have the reason why they would use God as the storm god makes sense, because that's where life comes from, is your storms. Being able to grow crops and things like that. Now, why do we want to get into this? I think this is actually really important for the book of Job, because Job at its heart is actually dealing with these two images, though, of death, chaos, disorder, which is what Job's life is like, and God actually beating it, though. Okay? The undercurrent theme is that God is actually in control. We're going to see that in his monologues. It's not obvious from Job's perspective, but it's that in reality. So, again, starting with our storm god image. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Okay? Where's the whirlwind coming from? Now, the Hebrew word for whirlwind is storm, but this has become like such an iconic line, and it's translated that way. I think it's the Dewey. Definitely the King James uses the whirlwind, and it's just cemented in English. Almost every other book about Job is discourses in the whirlwind. So what's the whirlwind in the book of Job? Now, it probably does follow Elihu's speech, which is of this big impending storm, and the storm clouds departing, and then the wind that's blowing, and the thundering. I also think it could be all the people talking, because they're always talking about how they're billowing east wind, and they're full of hot air, and everyone's yelling a lot at each other. Maybe that's the whirlwind. But it's definitely going to be post-Elihu. It makes you immediately think the storm image. And so God is coming in this storm, and now he's manifesting his power. And he's going to destroy the disorder of Job's life. He's going to set into order Job's life. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now, Gregory the Great says, well, this is talking about Elihu, because that's who was just talking. Who? The only problem is that the first verse says he's talking to Job. And the structure actually makes it seem apparent that it's Job is the reference, that Job is the one darkening counsel. Now, that's another thing. Darkens counsel. No one knows who Job is actually counseling, or who's the recipient of this knowledge. Who's having his counsel darkened, his knowledge darkened by the speaking of Job? Who's Job darkening? Is this us? I tend to think it's us a little bit, as we're trying to scratch our heads and we're trying to piece out why does the innocent man suffer? Yeah, there's something wrong with God's justice. Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me. Okay, he's definitely talking to Job. So I view this as kind of obvious that it's Job. Now, I have a great quote for you. With God's speech, as the climax of the book, the Job poet takes a risk that only a supreme artist confident in his genius could do. He had already created for Job the most extraordinarily powerful poetry to express Job's intolerable anguish and his anger against God. Now, when God finally speaks, the poet fashions for him still greater poetry, which thus becomes a poetic manifestation of God's transcendent power, and also an image-for-image response to the death wish poem that frames Job's entire argument. The unusual phrase darkens counsel is not merely an addition of speaking ignorantly, but a rejoinder to the spate of images of darkness blotting out light in the death wish poem of chapter 3. In pointed contrast to that poem, the opening section of The Voice from the Whirlwind introduces images of light and then traces a dynamic interplay between light and darkness. And we should actually really think about this. So the first, what you really want to pay attention to, and you do this on your own actually, but you will really want to, especially from verse 3 to 21. You really want to go back and look at chapter 3. Because, yeah, what's up?
Oh.
Shh.
The numbers.
Yeah.
The bishop's been rubbing off on you.
Huh?
I heard the bishop's been rubbing off on you.
No. Yeah, I didn't tell many stories about the dinner of the bishop.
You guys know the office, the debt's coming next.
You're supposed to go in through the back door and like.
Because I wanted to interrupt you.
Oh, okay.
How was y'all?
Yeah. That was worse than having a little kid run in here. All right. So what our poet does here, and this is actually quite beautiful. You have to remember, this is why I did my second lecture was chapter 3, which I called the Song of Darkness. I did that for a reason. Because chapter 3, which is Job's first cry about cursing the day he was born and let no stars shine, let the day dawn, not let the dawn open its eyes. I forget what it says. But he blacks out all of creation and he basically says, I wish I never were born. Curse the day that a man-child was born. Well, God has heard that cry. And God's opening monologue is actually going to be a complete reversal. And in my play, it was all on the dawn of the day, and it was all about light coming in. And his main theme is actually going to be not darkness, but light. Where were you? You know where the light is. And God is unwinding. He's actually responding to Job's first cry at the end of his 7 days. So I'm going to point out just certain little references. Gird up your loins like a man. His first come up is hey, Job, get up. Gird up your loins like a man. That word, Geber, that's like an echo of Job saying, curse the day when a Geber was born, when a man was born. So God now is saying, quit crying about what you were born as and start being what you were born as, huh? Listen to me. I will question you, and you shall declare to me. It seems like it's kind of sarcastic a little bit. Because he's going to give him almost 70 questions, and none of them they all have a negative response. It's obvious. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? This is a plumb line. Those of you who are architects, huh? The Egyptians used one too, huh? On what were its bases sunk, or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. So this whole section right here gives a picture of God the master craftsman, huh? And it is really actually making, this is its own kind of creation account. This is kind of distinct from Genesis chapter 1 and 2. Okay? In a certain way, it's the same image, but it's using completely different vocabulary. In Genesis chapter 1, God just speaks and things are. But here, listen. What do you think of when you say foundation, measurements, plumb line, base, corner, and a cornerstone? How is creation described as here? It's a temple. He's building a big building. Huh? Creation is God's worship house. Okay? And actually, to prove the point that it's his worship house, what happens when he builds it? The morning stars sang together. Now, this kind of image of the stars actually being kind of angelic singing voices. Sons of God shouting for joy, praises. At the finishing of the temple, kind of builds this whole kind of liturgical creation as liturgy. So, this is his making of creation. Then where does it go? Verse 8. Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst forth from the womb? this shut in. So here, to describe the divine power, Yahweh is saying, I closed in the sea with doors. Okay, when it burst forth from the womb. So first of all, he's juxtaposing certain things. One is like, okay, the sea normally is death, but it's coming out of that which life comes, the womb. It's kind of, this is getting into the little mystery, I think, of true wisdom, which is that God brings good out of evil. That which doesn't have life still comes from life, and his plan and his order. So the seed comes forth from a womb. And this is playing on Job saying, why did not die in the womb? Well, the seed was even born. Sorry, Job, you will be too. Okay? The seed is born, but who shut in the sea with doors? Okay, the shutting in is that word hedged in. Remember how Job said, my way is hedged in, I can't see it. He's using the same word. Because the sea is contained. Even though God gave birth to it, he contained it. Say, don't worry. Well, the flood happened, but I'll never do that again. Okay? But it's contained. It's not going to destroy everything. When I made clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band. That's a beautiful image. So the mist over the sea becomes like the swaddling clothes. Like God, okay, I contained the chaos monster after it got born out, and then I swaddled it in little baby clothes. Because it's my creation too. Okay? Where were you when I did that, Job? You think your life is bad? Hey, if I can do that to the sea, I definitely can do that to you. Who prescribed bounds for it and set bars and doors, and said, thus far shall you come and no farther. Here shall your proud waves be stayed. Okay, the proud waves of the sea, which always seek to go past their boundaries, but God has said it. I think this is probably one of the things that we should look at a lot, which is God constantly talking about how he sets bars, I guess we could say doors. The ordered creation, things have lines and boundaries, and God is maintaining them. Have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the skirts of the earth, and the wicked be shaken out of it? This is the only time that man is actually vaguely referenced to in God's plan, in God's monologues. And it's used twice, this wicked. So the image here of verse 12 is actually, okay, the earth is in complete darkness, and the thing that first touches the horizon is the light from the dawn. And it's basically like you would what's that called when you do that to a garment? Huh? So when you snap a garment, yeah, I know that, the fly off it. That's what the dawn is doing to the entire earth with the wicked people. Because if you remember that one Job monologue where it's in the night when the thieves go out and the adulterers is people who do crimes in the darkness, and the light is like, stop doing your crimes. Why? Because I set a time boundary for the night. The night will be no more because dawn will come. I'm going to expose you all. So for Yahweh, it's not about the setting of the sun. It's about the rising of the sun. So don't get stuck on the bad ending. There's always a dawn after the evening. It is changed like clay under the seal and is dyed like a garment. So the earth is like clay that's changed by a seal. Now, I've actually been thinking about this. So what we have here, he talks about the sea in 8 through 10, and here through 12 through 15, it's about the earth. So it's complements. And it does it in different ways. But I've actually always thought about this. What's the it? What's the it here? It is changed like clay under the seal, and is dyed like a garment. It's the earth that it's talking about. But we have to remember, what is causing it to change? It's the morning, because God's morning comes and his days begin. Okay, so the day changes the earth, like clay under a seal. a seal impresses upon clay, and then it leaves its figure. I've always actually thought in Genesis chapter 1, God only makes things and makes his distinctions during the daylight, with the exception of stars at night. It's always during the day that God makes creation, establishes order. Okay? You have this like uncreated clay, and it's during the day that it gets sealed into its figure. It's with light that it gets ordered. Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare, if you know all of this. So, of course, it's no, no, no. So, it's going through now Job's adventuresome, well, he's been sitting in the same place for 7 days. But now God is taking him into all the places where Job actually could never go if he wanted to. Okay? Walking in the recesses of the deep. In the Tehom. If you want to, actually, you should you should read Proverbs 8. It's the description of wisdom. It's used in the Marian Mass. Wisdom was with God when he did all these things. Wisdom has done all these things and walked in all these places. No man has ever been able to do that. Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare if you know all this. Where is the way to the dwelling of light, and where is the place of darkness? That you may take it to its territory, and that you may discern the path to its home. You know, for you were born then, and the number of your days is great. So, and this is getting into something, why there is actually such a thing as myth. Because nobody was alive in order to witness the world being created. So nobody could record it if they wanted to, what exactly it was like. And myth is actually the language to describe what is not describable. That's why it's not false. It's true, but you have to take it according to its sign value, because it has to use signs. Because nobody was born when any of this stuff happens. Nobody could record it. So we have to make really descriptive stories to describe what happens. We don't have the wisdom for it. Have you entered the storehouses of snow, and have you seen the storehouses of hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble, for the day of battle and war? This is going to be another big thing. God fights a lot of this. He likes military images. So here we have snow and hail. We don't never normally think about snow being used as divine punishment. It doesn't really show up in the Bible. But maybe the idea is with these two things is, maybe this is the poet also playing with images, that snow and hail are both water hidden in a different form. Death hidden in a different form. What is the way to the place where the light is distributed and where the east wind is scattered upon the earth? Who has cleft a channel for the torrents of the rain and a way for the thunderbolt, to bring rain on a land where no man is, on the desert in which there is no man, to satisfy the waste and desolate land, to make the ground put forth grass. This is a very interesting thing that God says here. This tends to be a little bit opposite than what we normally get from the Old Testament. What does this verse teach us? This verse teaches us that God takes care of his creation regardless of man is even there to enjoy it. We tend to think of everything as man-centered, anthropomorphic, like everything is revolves around man. And Genesis chapter 1 definitely does portray that, like man is the middle of the cosmos. But that doesn't mean man is an egoist and it's just all about man. Like God created creation because creation itself is good too. And regardless of whether man is anywhere located in God's all creation, he still is maintaining his order over it. I don't need you, man, to maintain my order. He even takes care of the desert. He gives it rain when it needs it. Have you ever been to Death Valley in the spring? When the desert blooms? I haven't. I wanted to go see it, though. I have this moment. Okay. Has the rain a father who has begotten the drops of dew? From whose womb did the ice come forth? And who has given birth to the hoarfrost of heaven? It's the gray hair of heaven. It's like, I think, the feathery clouds, maybe. The waters become hard like stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lead forth the Mazzaroth in their season? This word here is contested. Mazzaroth could be just the general term for constellation. Most people try to think that this is a specifically named constellation, which nobody knows the identification of. Or it could just mean constellations. The thing is, constellations tell you the seasons. Did you know that? That's why there's like the 12 zodiac signs that tells you where the sun is in the zodiac, tells you what season you're in. Can you guide the bear with its children? That's not Ursa Major. That's also debated. Most people think it's Ursa Major, but it could be Arcturus in the constellation Bootes. It could be Arcturus. Some people think it's Leo, the lion. But we have stars. And again, they're not just like doing whatever they want. They're bound in chains. The book of Enoch uses a similar image, actually. The wandering stars are chained. Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you establish their rule on the earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds, that a flood of waters may cover you? Can you send forth bolts of lightning, that they may go, and say to you, here we are? Who has put wisdom in the clouds, or given understanding to the mists? Both these words are like highly contested and don't make any sense in the Hebrew. Jerome has, who has put wisdom in the innermost parts of man, and given understanding to the rooster. That's what Jerome has. I like Jerome, though. So, actually, the Hebrews don't know how to translate this word either. And the rabbinic tradition was actually that it was rooster. So Jerome is following actually like rabbinic tradition. When he in his Vulgate he puts rooster. Okay, I'm going with rooster here. And I think the idea though is with the rooster, the idea is because why does the rooster have understanding? Before he knows when light's coming, and so he starts making noise. Hey, light's gonna come. Light's gonna come. That's good knowledge, huh? To know that it's not always gonna be darkness is good. Especially in the context of all this bad stuff. Who can number the clouds by wisdom? Wait, let me just write that. Rooster. Vulgate. Okay, knock yourself out. Who can number the clouds by wisdom, or who can tilt the waterskins of heaven? See, I love these images. Okay, so God has two jars, like, above the clouds, okay? And he just take some water. That's rain. Like, I know, like the water cycle and all that, but I'm sorry, but, like, the idea of God having, like, big hands and just, like, pouring some water jars on us actually is closer to the truth in some ways, because we're not, like, a separated system. And like, God is actually causing all of it all the time. That's what this is actually trying to get to you. It's not that God just spoke, creation was, and then he just watches. It's that God continues to bind the sea. Keep those doors little water over here. Okay? Over here. He hasn't even talked about men yet at all, except the wicked. I'll whip them out of the night because I'm going to bring light. So this first speech is going to be mainly meteorology and cosmology. It had to do with creation, and then solar creation stuff, stars. And now we're going to go to the animal kingdom. Can you hunt prey for the lion and satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens or lie in wait for their hiding places? Who provides for the raven its prey when its young ones cry to God and wander about for lack of food? So the first animal, now we're going to start zoology, huh? He's going to go through the animal kingdom. Oh, man. I misspelled that too. This first image he gives us is lion, okay? Now notice too, this is not like a very idyllic, peaceful image either, right? It's like prey, appetite, okay? Like this is bloody teeth, okay? When they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in their hiding place, who provides for the raven its prey? And its young ones cry to God and wander about for lack of food. So the animals don't have intelligence. So when they're squawking and doing all that, how do we still have ravens and lions and all that? Well, it's because God provides. God made such a thing as prey, is what you need to be thinking. You couldn't have lions if you didn't have gazelles get eaten. This is a hierarchy of being. Do you know when the mountain goats bring forth? Mountain goat, mountain goat, mountain goat, mountain goat. You can think of an ibex or something like that. Do you observe the deer? This is a doe, because it's going to be giving birth. Bringing forth their young. Can you number the months that they fulfill? And do you know the time when they bring forth? Actually, you know what? Like, we just know when there's too many of them, so we go out and hunt them. You know, I mean, the animals, they just keep propagating regardless of whether we're around, you know? They're like, don't get too stuck like, oh yeah, we know exactly, you know, the gestation period of deer now and all. Like, it's not dealing with science. It's dealing with what causes the world to still be there even when we're not around. And you know what? It keeps going. Their young ones become strong. They grow up in the open. They go forth. They do not return to them. Yeah, that's right. They fly. They leave the nest. Just like human babies are supposed to do. Get ready, human babies. Okay. Who has let the wild donkey go free? Who has loosed the bonds of the swift donkey? To whom I have given the steppe for his home, the salt land for his dwelling place. He scorns the tumult of the city. He hears not the shouts of the driver. He ranges the mountains as his pasture. He searches after every green thing. Here's our wild donkey running through the mountains, eating little sagebrush and stuff. The idea, though, is like, again, it's shunning man. This is creation apart from man. The wild ox, some kind of bison or something. This, in the Old Testament, this is a symbol for, like, power. Joseph is called an ox. This is used to describe the northern kingdom, too. I think that's your image. I know bison is a North American creature, but it's some kind of big wild ox. This is a non-domesticated beast. Can somebody silence that cell phone? That's really distracting. Will he spend the night at your crib? Ed! Turn your phone off. Is the wild ox willing to serve you? Will he spend the night at your crib? That's an interesting picture. Because it also kind of changes a little bit. Even though that's not a wild ox. But it's still, you can kind of see it going that way, right? Will the ox know its... Isaiah uses a similar kind of image. Will the ox know its master? Huh? I don't know. Can you bind him in the furrow with ropes, or will he harrow the valleys after you? So the idea is that, yeah, you can't, it's a non-domesticated, wild, strong beast that you can't hook up your wagon to and go plow fields. Think of, like, in the Midwest, like trying to, like, set up a yoke on a bunch of buffalo and drive buffalo. Like, it's not going to happen, okay? Even Paul Bunyan didn't do that, right? He actually used a big cow, right? Betsy was a big cow. Was it Betsy or something? What is it? Babe? I knew it started with a B. Will you depend on him because his strength is great, or will you leave to him your labor? Do you have faith in him that he will return and bring your grain to your threshing floor? The idea is that man can't use, you can't use those guys. You don't trust them to do your work because he's not going to do it. If you're going to go to sleep, why don't you just turn it off anyway? So, the idea is that the ox itself, though, is doing God's work. Like God does rely and trust because it does exactly what it's supposed to do, according to what God wanted it to do. Okay, it's not meant to work for man. That's the idea. It's more than any one man. Creation is more than any one man. I think we can definitely say that. Verse 13 to 18 is like the funniest part of this entire book. The wings of the ostrich wave proudly, but are they the pinions and plumage of love? It's a question mark. You should think about that for a second. Because they're not wings for flying. Like, this guy knows that. Like, it seems like the wings are kind of useless. And the ostrich has these wings and just flies around. I kind of think of Chesterton when Chesterton said, you know God has a sense of humor because he made such a thing as the duck-billed platypus and the crocodile. He says something like that. Like, no one could have imagined a creature like that. Well, this is the book of Job using the same kind of image, but with an ostrich. This is also the only one of the animal things that doesn't have a rhetorical question in it, as far as could Job do or trust or know this. It says, the wings of the ostrich wave proudly, but are they the pinions and plumage of love? For she leaves her eggs to the earth and lets them be warmed on the ground. So she doesn't like cover them with her wings like a chicken does. Maybe that's what he's going at. So they're not wings of love because she doesn't cuddle her young with them. Forgetting that a foot may crush them and the wild beast may trample on them. So the ostrich just leaves that egg there and like take off. Okay? But you know what? We still have ostriches. The whole point. She deals cruelly with her young as if they were not hers. Leaves the egg in the dirt. Though her labor be in vain, yet she has no fear. She's not worried, like, hey, someone's going to step on that egg. She's just, like, running around, waving her useless wings that don't make her fly. Okay? Because God has made her forget wisdom, because she doesn't actually have any understanding to actually be worried about the egg. Okay? And given her no share in understanding, she doesn't know what she's doing. When she rouses herself to flee, she laughs at the horse and rider. So she can run faster than the horse and rider as she, like, leaves her egg back in the dirt when the horse comes, okay? She doesn't have any fear because God made her stupid. I mean, that's kind of like the image he gives her. This is segueing into the next. So that's the funny ostrich. The horse. Do you give the horse his might? Now, this is like, for the horse, at least for the Jobin poet, like the horse is about war. Horse is about war. Do you give the horse his might? Do you clothe his neck with strength? Do you make him leap like the locust? His majestic snorting is terrible. He paws in the valley and exults in his strength. He goes out to meet the weapons. He laughs at fear and is not dismayed. That's the neighing, huh? He does not turn back from the sword. Upon him rattle the quiver, the flashing spear, and the javelin. See how it doesn't even like talk about his rider? Like, it really doesn't want you to be thinking about men. It wants you to be thinking about creation. Stop thinking about man and your problems. Think about creation. With fierceness and rage, he swallows the ground. That's some snorting and neighing at the ground, probably. He cannot stand still at the sound of the trumpet. When the trumpet sounds, he says, aha. Okay, that's the neighing. He smells the battle from afar, the thunder of the captains and the shouting. He loves it. He's going to run right into it, huh? Is it by your wisdom that the hawk soars and spreads his wings towards the south? Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high? On the rock he dwells and makes his home, in the fastness of the rocky crag. From there he spies out the prey. His eye beholds it afar off. The young ones suck up blood, and where the slain are, there is he. So here we have this image of, he uses the words eagle, okay? But it's the image of, it's carrion birds. And maybe actually, to tell you the truth, is where the slain are. He was just talking about this like horse going into battle, okay? In the aftermath of even man's battle, when you have carcasses on the strewn about, and that death and destruction. God brings life out of that too. The vultures feed off of them. Maybe the dead horse. Make it the horse. That's a better image. It's the dead horse. And where the slain are, there is he. Where the eagle mounts up. I think this is interesting because I think it's Matthew 24, where Christ in his apocalypse, he goes, where the eagles are, where the body is, there the eagles are. It's a really mysterious line. I think it's this image actually. This idea of the eagle being kind of like a vague carrion bird. It's a word that probably could also mean vulture. And the Lord said to Job, shall a fault finder contend with Almighty? He who argues with God, let him answer it. Then Job answered the Lord, behold, I am small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. Job silences himself. I have spoken once, and I will not answer. Twice, but I will proceed no further. So this was his second time speaking. I go no more. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. So our poet continues. Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you declare to me. Gives you the same introductory line. Job needs a man up. Will you even put me in the wrong? Will you condemn me that you may be justified? This is the heart, I think, of actually, from Yahweh's monologue, what is the contested issue. Of our problems, the first one was actually in the prologue. The devil wanted to say, does Job worship in vain? Does he only worship because good things happen to him? You should be thinking of yourself right now. You only worship God because good things happen to you. The devil said yes, which is why he wanted to test God. Test Job to prove to God that Job would break faith. Now, Job actually hasn't broken any faith. He doesn't know what's going on. It's something different. Job has been trying to defend his innocence. And he definitely complains that bad things have happened to him. And there's a reasonableness to that to a certain degree. But he wants to take God to court and go to have a court case. Which means God has to defend himself to a certain degree. Does God have to defend himself? Now this is how Yahweh sees it. Will you put me in the wrong will you condemn me that you may be justified? It's a moral question. It's a moral question. If we say God does something wrong, that's a weird thing, because if we say God does something wrong, that means we're doing something right. Like, if we have to condemn God, it's normally to cover up something else that we're doing wrong. I think is the way it's seeing it. Because Job is basically saying, I'm being unjustly punished, which means God is being unjust. So that means in order to justify himself, he has to condemn God. Or he has to reinterpret his terms. Like, no, I'm not being unjustly punished. Maybe he has to be more reserved like he was in the prologue where he goes, freely I was given and freely the Lord takes away. Naked I came into this earth, naked I will go return to it. Have you an arm like God? Can you thunder with a voice like his? Deck yourself with majesty and dignity, clothe yourself with glory and honor. Job actually said this in his concluding monologue about how he was this great judge who meted out justice. And he walked around with like a turban of glory and robes of splendor, and everybody listened to his wise judgments. Well, I guess God wasn't really impressed with that. Okay? Pour forth the overflowings of your anger, and look on everyone that is proud, and abase him. This second monologue of Yahweh is going to focus on this. This is like a key word here. It's going to be pride. Look on everyone that is proud and bring him low. It gives you a double invocation there. So when it doubles up, okay, something like really important is going on here, okay? So abase the proud one and bring the proud one low. The thing is that Job, even with all of his great judgment, he can't do that. Human power can't do that. And tread down the wicked where they stand. You can't uproot it. Try. Try. Our Lord even said, for the sake of the wheat, don't pull up the weeds. Why did he say that? Because you can't get rid of it. I'm sorry. It's beyond human industry capacity, intelligence, and frankly, it's against the wisdom of God to completely eradicate the bad side that needs to be controlled and contained. You can't get rid of it. Hide them all in the dust together. Bind their faces in the world below. Then will I also acknowledge to you, and your own right hand can give you victory. God will bow to you if you can get rid of evil on earth. Whoa, Book of Job right there. That's like basically sarcastic though. Like the idea is God's never going to bow to you because you can't do that. Which means you're going to have to learn how to live with it. You have to learn to live with it. Okay, now that was his little... Now we're going... So we did cosmology, meteorology, zoology. We had this small little part about, hey, you're going to have to deal with proud, evil, wicked people. And now we're going to do I'm thinking of it. Mythic beasties. It's something like that. Okay? It's going to have two of them. And this is why I gave you that first talk, because Job is going to give you like the longest description. Actually, Job gives you a better description of the Leviathan than any of the other cultures do. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to read those to you. Just so you see little snapshots in the other cultures. Our Bible actually preserves those traditions better in some ways. Behold, behemoth, which I made, as I made you. I made this big thing just like I made you, okay? You're not that special. I made you both. He eats grass like an ox, and behold, his strength is in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. Hippopotamus. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. Okay, hippopotamus don't have big tails, so that's going on out there. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze, and his limbs like bars of iron. Okay, this is like, whoa, what is this thing? He is the first of the works of God. Let him who made him bring near his sword. For the mountains yield food for him, where all the wild beasts play. Under the lotus plants he lies, in the hiding place of the reeds, and in the marsh. For his shade, the lotus trees cover him. The willows of the brook surround him. Behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is not confident through the Jordan, though the Jordan rushes against his mouth. Can one take him with hooks or pierce his nose with a snare? So the Talmud actually records a couple different traditions here. And one is, it tends to actually view this as shifting away from the behemoth and talking about the Leviathan. And he goes, the Jordan rushes against, I forget who it was, but one of the rabbis goes, like, the Jordan rushes against Leviathan's mouth. And the other rabbi goes, no, it's talking about the behemoth, because it says that if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. And then the other rabbi goes, yes, the behemoth is not frightened because the Leviathan is containing the Jordan. Like the Leviathan being in the river and controlling the river makes the behemoth happy. So anyway, the idea though is that we're going to see these images come down in the Leviathan, this idea of the river, the Jordan, the hooks, and the snare. So it's kind of debated if whether the behemoth stops and the Leviathan starts. Also, I would like to add that according to Hebrew tradition, the Leviathan was created in Genesis chapter 1 like everything else. Right? it said that God made the big, I think it says the whales or the sea monsters, right? It says he created it. It actually uses the word create. Same word used for man. The Hebrews believed actually it would be too big. Both of them combined, the sea wouldn't be able to contain them. So God took one of them and put them on land. And so they wouldn't propagate and destroy the world. And so one was the behemoth and the other one was Leviathan. So you had these two monsters who were actually mates that were separated. 4th Ezra also records that. That's 1st century AD, Christian apocryphal text. So this idea of the behemoth and Leviathan as a mate, as a pair, is kind of interesting. I find it interesting, too, is that in the book of Revelation, there's a big dragon that comes out of the sea. But then there's also this beast that the Whore of Babylon rides on. And no one actually knows that those are two different beasts, or if it's the same beast. It's harder to figure it out. Maybe it's the behemoth and Leviathan. Anyway, they're a pair. And I think, and the Christians definitely do notice this, that the behemoth or / Leviathan is in the Jordan, seeking to devour the stuff in it. It gets picked up in baptismal imagery. Can you draw out the Leviathan with a fishhook, or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many supplications to you? Will he speak to you soft words? Will the big terrible sea monster convince you not to kill it? Like, be scared of you. So it's like, oh, please, please, please don't do that. Please, Yahweh, don't yank me out of the water. Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird, or you put him on a leash for your maidens? Will traders bargain over him? Will they divide him up among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears? Lay hands on him. Think of the battle. You will not do it again. Behold, the hope of a man is disappointed. He is laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is he that can stand before me? Who has given to me what I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine. So this ends up becoming like the main thing of God's power. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Job in chapter 3 actually said, let those stir up the Leviathan who can curse the dawn. He said something like that. Here God is directly rebuking Job for that, saying actually no one is so fierce that you can stir up the Leviathan. And if no one can do that, no one can actually stand before me. That's actually a big indictment too, because Job has been saying like, let me go before him, lay my case. I will not keep silent concerning his limbs, of his mighty strength or his large frame. So he just keeps going on and on. Who can strip off his outer garment? Who can penetrate his double coat of mail? Who can open the doors of his face? Round about his teeth is terror. His back is made of rows of shields, shut up closely as with a seal. One is so near to another that no air could come between them. So it's not a crocodile. They are joined together, they clasp each other and cannot be separated. He sneezes, flash forth light. The sneezings flash forth light. And his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. Okay, so it's a really big sea monster, okay? When it opens its eyes, you think it's the sun, but it's not. It's like that. What's that one fish that has like a little light bulb in front of his face? Yeah, it's like a cosmic size one of those. You know, you see that thing like, oh, look, it's the sun. Yeah, let's sail towards it. And then you go right into its mouth. Out of his mouth go flaming torches, sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils come forth smoke, and from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame comes forth from his mouth. In his neck abides strength, and terror dances before him. The folds of his flesh cling together, firmly cast upon him, and immovable. His heart is hard as stone, hard as a nether millstone. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid. At the crashing they are beside themselves. Though the sword reaches him, it does not avail. Nor the spear, the dart, the javelin. All these human weapons that doesn't make it. If the Bible were written in contemporary terms, it might as well say like, all your cruise missiles and nukes, they don't phase them. It doesn't matter. You can't destroy them. Why? Because he's superior to you in some ways. Though the sword reaches him, it does not avail. Nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He counts iron as straw, and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. For him, slingstones are turned to stubble. Clubs are counted as stubble. He laughs at the rattle of javelins. His underparts are like sharp potsherds. He spreads himself like a threshing sledge on the mire. He makes the deep boil like a pot. He makes the sea like a pot of ointment. Behind him he leaves a shining wake. One would think the deep to be hoary, have white hair. Upon earth there is not his like, a creature without fear. Behold, he beholds everything that is high. He is the king over all the sons of pride. That's the Leviathan. You can see where the Christians would take this one. That's the dragon. That's the serpent. That's the snake. Yeah, exactly. And it's he who is the king of the world. I've heard somebody else say something very similar to that. Now notice, God, in order to describe his power, he actually just shows how powerful the things underneath him actually are. It's kind of like a negative way of showing your power. Like, this guy is nothing to me. Let me tell you how powerful he is. Like, that's the only way you can actually understand my power is by thinking of other things that are powerful. You can't, because I've so surpassed that, like, you don't have access to it. But that's so important. Like, why? Think of that. It just gave us like 34 verses describing some like mythic creature. All of chapter 41. It's a whole chapter. Some mythic sea monster. Like, I think that's like important because I think that's the allegory of the entire book in a certain sense. I think it's like Job's life. Like, he's definitely equating it with this idea of like death and chaos. And the whole mystery is that is not actually an adversary because God is completely in control of it. Just as God is in control of Leviathan. Like, you can't get rid of it. You can't try destroying it. You can't uproot evil. And you can't kill the Leviathan. But you know what? Like, I completely control that thing. Though it's chaos, it's completely controlled. Then Job answered the Lord, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel with knowledge? So Job repeats that one mysterious line, and nobody knows who he's talking about. His counsel is darkened. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Hear, and I will speak. I will question you, and you declare to me. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. So Job, it seems at the end of this, actually has gotten some wisdom. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear. In the interlude poem, actually death and the sea both say, like, we have heard of wisdom. We talked about hearing, of the rumors of it. Job sees it at the end of this book. I heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. This is what William Blake actually has a picture of Job seeing Christ here. Because this idea of like the human eye seeing God has to be Christ. After the Lord had spoke these words to Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, my wrath is kindled against you and your two friends, for you have not spoken to me what is right, as my servant Job has. I don't know what part of Job he's talking about. Is it everything? Is it one line? Is it that last line? Job is right about lots of things. Now therefore take 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up for yourselves a burnt offering. My servant Job shall pray for you, for I will accept his prayer to deal with you according to your folly. So they were the foolish ones, and they have to have intercessory prayer by Job in order for God to be kind to them again. And notice that Elihu is not spoken of here either. For you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. So God says that twice. What is right, as my servant Job? What is right, as my servant Job? So Eliphaz the Temanite and Bildad the Shuhite and Zophar the Naamathite went and did what the Lord told them. And the Lord accepted Job's prayer. Okay, so they're all good and happy now. And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends. And the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. And then came to him all his brothers and his sisters, and all who had known him before, and ate bread with him in his house. And they showed him sympathy and comforted him from all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. What do you mean showed him sympathy? Like you just got everything again. It's like all done. Then they all come afterwards. It's kind of disjointed a little bit. Like, that's not very good company. Why didn't they come earlier when he was surrounded by the 3 friends? And each of them gave him a piece of money and a ring of gold. And the Lord blessed. And the Lord blessed the later days of Job more than his beginning. And he had 14,000 sheep and 6,000 camels and 1,000 yoke of oxen, 1,000 she-donkeys. He also had 7 sons, 3 daughters. And he called the name of the first one Jemimah, and the name of the second Keziah, and the name of the third Kernahapuk. In all the land, I don't know if I'm pronouncing those right at all. And in all the land there were no women so fair as Job's daughters. And their father gave them inheritance among their brothers. That's interesting. And after this, Job lived 140 years. Yes, 70 times 2. And saw his sons and his sons' sons 4 generations. And Job died, an old man, full of days. So that's our little prose epilogue. It's a confusing one. The end of it. Good. How many? 14? 14. And I cut a lot of stuff out. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry I went so long. It's an hour and a half. That's kind of like normal, isn't it? All right. Thank you, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory be to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Benedictio Deum tentis, et Patris et Filii Spiritus Sanctis, et super vos et mani semper. Amen.